It's Saturday, September 21st, a week after Sean O'Malley lost to Dvalishvili in their UFC 306 main event. The numbing feeling of a wrong pick and a lost $50 to the bookies is finally wearing off. My friend, a competent wrestler and avid MMA fan, tried convincing me the day of the event to not bet on O'Malley, citing the recent Bilal Muhammad vs. Leon Edwards fight as a reference for how the 306 main event would pan out. Needless to say, I did not take his advice.
Frankie?
And what?
Stay out of those casinos.
As a general rule, when looking at a matchup between a striker and a grappler, a betting man should always choose the grappler. Here's some numbers. In the last 150 UFC pay-per-view main events, grapplers and strikers have met 50 times. Grapplers have won 34 of those meetings, compared to the striker's anemic 15. Usually, the striker will work on having exceptional takedown defense in order to negate the grappling disadvantage, resetting what could have been a disastrous takedown back to the feet where the striker can outperform the grappler. However, occasionally strikers will counter the takedown shot outright, with the knee. So are these knockouts flukes? Just lucky shots that happen to land, or can the knee be a reliable counter? I was skeptical about this counter until I watched Edson Barboza land a flush knee to knock out Billy Quarantillo. Edson Barboza told DC in the post-fight interview, "I trained this exact movement for 8 weeks." Barboza was able to land this knee by making a read. Barboza knows that Quarantillo wants to shoot and reliably predicted that he would shoot near the fence after throwing a right hand, which Quarantillo did earlier in the fight. All he needed was the opportunity, which he found in round 1. Here's another example of a devastating knee-punished read. MVP versus Cyborg.
We noticed that a lot of these guys, a lot of Cyborg's fight, he would lean over to throw his overhand. And that's a perfect, time for me to land my jump knee.
Both Barboza and MVP drilled these knees in training camp and pulled it out in the actual fight. MVP wasn't exactly countering a takedown, but the head movement is very similar. One unique advantage that pro fighters have in contrast to other sports is time to prepare. Usually getting 2 to 3 months, a fighter's camp can go through every documented fight of the opponent looking for patterns that can be exploited. So apart from technicality, strength, and endurance, there is another factor. How well did you do your homework? A fighter's camp can actually find these reads pre-fight by studying film and breaking down the option selection of the opponent. And this is exactly how Barboza and MVP were able to pull off their stunning knee KOs. However, this will not work on all grapplers. This is because some grapplers' takedowns are simply faster and better disguised than others. In the Barboza vs. Quarantillo fight, Quarantillo has an obvious tell, throwing the right hand, and Barboza is able to react and counter. Let's look at some frame data. At 60 frames per second, Quarantillo's right hand takes around 16 frames to land, with the takedown shot after taking another 12 to 14 frames. So essentially, Barboza has a 30-frame window. Barboza's knee takes about 12 frames from the time he starts reacting to Quarantillo's right hand till the knee lands. So Barboza starts reacting to Quarantillo's right hand around the same time the right hand lands on Barboza's face, around 16 frames in. But he knows for a fact that the takedown comes next, and he has enough time to execute the knee to meet Quarantillo's face around frame 27. So by reacting to the hand, Barboza has enough time to land the knee to counter the takedown. It's a similar situation in the MVP fight. Cyborg's right hand is very telegraphed and lungy, and would take about 30 frames or half a second to land, and MVP starts reacting about halfway through and intercepts with a flying knee. However, not all grapplers have these tells. For example, let's take a theoretical matchup versus Khabib, hands down the most feared grappler the sport has seen. The game plan: counter the takedown shot with a knee. Looking at Khabib's last few fights, we can determine that Khabib will go for a single leg, shooting on the lead leg with his head on the outside for orthodox opponents. Although if our back is to the fence, he will most likely blast a double. He usually shoots near the fence, but not always. He sometimes feints a jab before shooting, but it is difficult to tell if it's an actual feint because he throws tons of jabs. From the start of the shot to when he has hands on his opponents, it only takes him around 24 frames. That's from the very first noticeable change in stance elevation to when he has hands around the leg where his head is invulnerable. That's insanely fast. And to make things worse, there is no real tell, like a punch that precedes the takedown. An opponent who starts reacting 16 frames in, like MVP or Barbosa, will simply not get the knee up in time to connect and get wrapped up and taken down. It would have to be something like a 6-frame knee, which I don't think is humanly possible. In fact, the best option is to sprawl, since sprawling is much faster than getting a knee up. So why did I pick O'Malley to win? The truth is, I really wasn't betting on O'Malley at all. I was betting on his coach, Tim Welch, who is in charge of recognizing these patterns and finding answers to the biggest questions. Merab shoots at least 10 takedowns a fight and holds the record for most takedown attempts in a fight at 38. So I imagine that Tim would have figured out exactly when Merab shoots, find a tell, and time a knee to counter, similar to how the Aljamain fight went down. And since Merab has no submission game, if O'Malley gets taken down, he can just wait out the round till the next round starts and try again. So he effectively gets 5 chances at a KO, or at least that was my thought process. In the actual fight, O'Malley got taken down 6 times and had nothing from Merab when Merab shot a takedown. On his podcast, Tim says Merab was shooting double legs instead of singles, which he usually does not do. I watched Merab's fights and can tell you he does go for doubles near the fence, though he does generally shoot singles. Like Khabib, Merab's takedowns are fast and the majority of them are unreactable when it comes to countering. Merab's takedown shots land in the same 24-frame window. He also has a variety of trips, ankle picks, and feints that he uses to mix up his takedowns. And in this regard, his takedowns are even more dynamic than Khabib's, even though he lacks finishing ability. So when the best you can do is sprawl and your opponent is far better grappler with infinite cardio, there's actually not much you can do but hope for a big shot, which obviously never came. To wrap this up, we have learned that picking out tells or slow movements and punishing those options can lead to beautiful and reliable knee KOs. However, against some grapplers, it is simply better to sprawl out of trouble, and top-level grapplers may simply be too fast to counter like Merab and Khabib. I'm sure we will see more knee KOs as camps are able to identify the tells of opponents, but going for a knee KO on a takedown that is unreactable seems like a poor game plan. So unless you have the reaction of an F1 driver, there's almost no way to counter a non-telegraphed and quick takedown attempt. The best you can do is sprawl, since sprawling is faster and more reliable, or just get good at grappling.